have you done as much as possible as an owner in Saudi Aramco Oil in the 4 years since you first invested in them?
Well, as I told you, we're prioritizing our efforts, and it has not been on that type of conventional oil.
Okay, so you have been a passive owner more than an active.
No, it has been we're part of a collaborative initiative, which is one of the steps, and the final step is blacklisting.
Hello, my name is Imre Ensog. I'm the CEO and founder of We Don't Have Time. At the last UN meeting, the COP28 in Dubai, all countries on this planet agree to transition away from fossil fuel. That is very hopeful. But this will not happen if we continue to invest in new oil, coal and gas extraction. And unfortunately, globally, our pension money are doing that for us. Last year, they invested $3 trillion in the fossil fuel industry, fueling the climate crisis. On We Don't Have Time, our community can send climate love to companies and leaders doing the right thing. For example, a bank that are stop lending to fossil fuel companies. And they can give climate warning to those that are doing the wrong thing in order to have them to change and to have a dialogue about it. And everyone can do this on the platform you see here. And here is one of the most trending review lately. That is a climate warning to the AP7 fund. That is a state-owned pension fund in Sweden that are helping 5 million of Swedish citizens to invest their money. And unfortunately, they are doing it in oil companies, such as Saudi Aramco Oil. In fact, AP7 is the 12th largest investor in the state-owned Saudi Aramco Oil. The Saudi government controls 98% of the company. So we have reached out to AP7 and they have agreed to do an interview about this. So follow me now and we will hear about why they're doing this investment. So we are here at the AP7 headquarters in central Stockholm. And with me I have Johan Florén. You are the head of ESG and communication at AP7. And first I want to say big thank you for inviting us here to have this dialogue. That is something that I think you deserve a lot of credit for. So thanks for having us. Can you start with telling us a little bit about your work? What do you do here at AP7?
Well, I'm Chief ESG and Communication Officer, so that means that I'm responsible for our ESG work, sustainability, and also communication is part of the team. So I have a team, and a couple of them are working with annual reports, websites, things like that. And the rest is ESG people.
So you're kind of the bridge between the ESG and the communication of the whole
you might say. I mean, they're very closely integrated, you might say. A lot of the communication is around sustainability reports and websites and things. And in the same way, you can see working with ESG are doing things that are very much about external relations. We collaborate with others. We're sort of answering questions and things like that. So I think they work very well together.
Sweden have so-called 6 AP funds.
Yes.
You're number 7, but what I understand, the 5th fund is not existing anymore. And you're
actually never existed.
It really. Never existed.
No.
So why is your name?
Yeah, I know, it's
6?
crazy. No, it started. Before we used to have a general pension fund, allmän pensionsfond. That's where the AP come from, with a number of fund boards. So there was board number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, etc. But in 2000, when the new system was launched, there were 4 different big buffer funds, AP1 to 4. And then you had 6 who invest in private equity. And they were sort of a unit that came out of the old system. But then we had the premium pension system, which was a new thing. So I think they basically thought that we already have the laws in place and the regulation. Let's use that even for the premium pension system. And AP7 is the default fund within that. So for this reason, we have 4 big buffer funds, 1 small within the same system, but we'll see what happens. I mean, there's political discussions around whether they should change that. And then you have AP7 within another part of the common pension system, the state.
So for our international viewers here in Sweden, we have a different pension system where everyone has to choose what they want to invest in for the pension. But if you don't choose, you are automatically choose AP7, but you can of course also choose actively AP7 if you want.
Yeah.
So you have actually 5 million pension savers. That's a lot of clients.
Yeah, I think we're closing on 5.7 or something. So
it's a lot of people that don't choose.
A lot of people. And
so
we
actively.
have somewhere around 1,100 billion Swedish krona asset under management.
And the government directive for AP funds is that you should create return of investment, but also in a sustainable way.
Exactly.
And this directive can be interpreted, if I understand correctly, a little bit differently among the AP funds. The first AP funds, for instance, they have this policy decision not to invest in fossil fuel.
Yes.
For moral reason, but also because they think it's a high risk that fossil fuel can become a stranded asset and they are thereby lose money, etc. But AP7, you have a different strategy that you still invest in fossil fuel. And what I understand of your communication, you think that you can actively influence them to become better. Can you tell us a little bit how are you doing that?
Yes. So the buffer funds have a similar assignment or mission from the government, but they are supposed to have different strategies for managing their assets, and they have. And it's sort of, the idea is not to, you could have made one big fund out of them, like the Norwegian Oil Fund or something. Yeah. But for a reason, it was divided into 4 to get a sort of, they could learn from each other, do different things, different strategies, gives a certain amount of diversification to risk, etc. And your investment strategy is where the ESG strategy starts. So we all, and this is also for the private market, of course, if you're, for example, a very small and very active fund and you do stock picking and things like that, you're going to have to choose an ESG strategy that is working with that approach. We have sort of the opposite at AP7. So we buy the whole market as it is. More than 3,000 companies defined by an index called MSCI ACWI. And the only exception from that is the companies that we blacklist. So, and we don't try to sort of outsmart the market. That's the basic belief in our investment philosophy, that this is very hard to do. Actually, both professional and private investors fail. And it's very, there's a lot of research that show this too. So we own sort of a small slice of the whole economy, being that's called sometimes that you're a universal owner. And that means that the problems that are out there, we have them in our portfolio. So we can start, instead of starting from the companies we own, if you have a small concentrated portfolio, maybe you own only 100 companies, then you have to start with them. We can start with the system as a whole and look at what are the biggest challenges here from a sustainability perspective. So we try to focus on, for example, climate change, but also biodiversity is a very natural thing. And then we think that our best possibility to make a difference, to make something happen in the real world, is using the position we have as owners in these companies. And we believe this, of course, because we see that in everyday life we can, collaborate with other investors. We can engage with the companies we have. We can vote. We can file resolutions. We can even take the companies to court, which we do every now and then. And all this because we own the companies. And we think that the alternative in our case, there's no one size fits all, so different investors have to choose. But we think that in our case, the alternative not owning is just not going to change anything.
But still, you have about 100 companies you have on blacklist where
Yes.
you decided on not owning, so you're not really having the same strategy for everything here.
Well, yeah, we have, but of course there's a certain amount of complexity in it, and in the way we use it, we have very much designed it to be a part of the engagement. So when we blacklist a company, it's the final step on an escalation ladder, and we have to have it, and this is both from a principle and a practical experience perspective, that if you want to have dialogue with companies and you have no sort of hard tools, the risk is that you don't get anything done.
I don't know if I agree with you. We have a dialogue here, and I'm not a saver of AP7. I'm not your pension saver.
I believe in dialogue a lot. So
and I'm still welcome here to have this dialogue about an issue we don't fully agree on. Can't you have the same approach to oil companies? You have a dialogue with them, and if they seem to do what you want, you invest after they have done it, instead of invest and have a dialogue after, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know that idea. I think, I think it's fundamentally flawed. And the reason is that when we approach a company as owners, we normally get their attention, and we can initiate a dialogue, but also if we have, you might call it a principal agent situation, we want them to have a long-term perspective and take sustainability into consideration. They might have a shorter-term perspective and think that this is irrelevant for their business. So if we want them to represent what we want them to do, we can use different types of levers to put pressure on them. And the reason we can do that is because we own them. If we would approach them as non-owners, non-investors, they would have very little interest in what we're saying. And then this, of course, is from experience too. So we think that a good dialogue, like we're trying to have now, complemented by harder tools such as litigations, shareholder proposals, voting, etc., is a very good combination if you want results.
I understand that you can have a lot of power if you invest in a company, and if you get together with other investors, you can build a group, and that can become the majority of the general meeting, etc. But in this case, we're talking about that AP7 has chosen to invest in Saudi Aramco Oil, and that's almost state-owned or controlled by 98% of the Saudi Arabia government.
Yes.
Even if you get 100% of their independent investors on board, you still only have 2% of the power. How is your strategy working here? And why is this not on the blacklist? Because I don't see, please convince me wrong, how you can influence the company when you never can get, never ever near a majority. To make it clear for the people viewing, we're talking about Saudi Arabia. That's a government where we had this UN meeting, COP28. They were heavily resisting the outcome of that meeting. They didn't want to phase out oil. They were resisting every legislation that will hurt the oil industry. So they are very much influencing in the wrong direction. And how can you have previously said that you don't see Saudi Aramco Oil as the same thing as the government, but can you really say that if you're owned by 98% of the government itself?
No, but I think this argument is very relevant. Of course, if you want to be an active owner in a company and there's a strong majority owner, it doesn't even have to be 98%, but someone who controls the company, it's your chances of influencing are not as good, for the simple reason that someone else controls it. However, we think that what is the defining criteria is not the other owners in themselves, it's the attitude from the company. So when we try to evaluate when a company is worth engaging with or not, it's their own behavior, whether they are improving, whether there's progress. We have other companies where it's in a similar situation, and some of them are sort of lost cases, and then there's nothing you can do. And others that are actually, they don't want to be in a conflict with other owners. And this is exactly the evaluation.
But here we're talking about a company with a main owner that were in conflict with almost all other interests in the climate meeting. And have you...
That's clearly very worrying.
And what did you do as an owner? Did you go out and publicly tell them that we will sell if they or continue doing this? Or what did you do about it, using your influence as a shareholder?
This is a step in the ladder that we will arrive.
But it happened in December.
Well,
the climate meeting is in 2 weeks.
Okay.
So we can't change the decision in January if it happened in December.
Yeah.
I mean, they had an influence over the outcome. They didn't succeed on all their will, but they weakened down the agreement. Where were you using your influence? If you have an influence, how are you using it?
Let me tell you.
Yes.
Yes. So we have a program that started in 2022, focusing on the biggest emitters in our portfolio and some other companies. It's part of an engagement process where we use this escalation ladder that I mentioned. And we prioritized the coal companies. So we started with those in 2022, and we have been engaging with a little more than 70 of them. And 36 are blacklisted today. And the other companies have... Today they have some sort of transition plan, which is what we require them to have. And when it comes to the blacklisting, this is something that we do twice a year. So we did one in late November, and then we're going to have another one in June. And we've been working on this program. It's going to be fully implemented in 2025. So we started 22, and it's going to be fully implemented in 2025. First, we focused on the coal companies since they are the worst from a climate perspective. Next step is going to be oil companies, which we're going to start now, and we're going to speed that process up a bit. So, I mean, these questions are exactly what we're going to engage with Saudi Aramco and other companies about.
Yes.
And in the end, it might become a blacklisting.
Sounds good that you're speeding up because we don't have time. But what... Exactly. But what have you done? When did you buy shares in Saudi Aramco, and what have you done since you become an owner?
They had their IPO 4 years ago. So that's when they came into the listed market, and it came right into our index. So we've been having this position for 4 years now.
That's quite a long time.
Yeah, well, you know, it's a long time process, and we started...
So what have you achieved in those 4 years influencing them?
Well, since we work with the market, we can talk about the influence on what happened in the market. When it comes to this specific company, we have an ongoing dialogue together with other investors.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about your dialogue, I'm talking about...
It has been some improvement.
Yeah, what
not
improvement?
very strong. Well, they have done things like long-term and medium-term target, and they have published them. They have a transparency they didn't used to have. These are small steps, so they're not going to be sufficient in the long run. But if you compare to other companies, there has been some improvements. Not a lot, but some.
And have you contributed to this?
Yeah, well, we're part of this collaboration.
How?
How we collaborate?
How
Okay.
have you had?
So
have you had many meetings with them? You talked about that you could have a lot of toolbox, everything from publicly talk about them, threatening to have them on a blacklist, to even sue companies and have voting in the general agreement, etc.
Yeah.
I'm asking, what have you done? Like, have you had like meetings every month, every quarter, every year, or how are you using your active ownership? How much time are you spending to actually influence that?
Okay, so let me explain how we work. We have about 3,000 companies, and we use our votes in all of them. And we also do something called norm-based screening. So we look for incidents, breaches to human rights, environmental norms, working conditions, corruption, things like that. Then we have a focus group, which is on big emitters and transition companies, you might say, where we also engage in investor collaboration. And in this particular case, it's an investor initiative called Climate Action 100. You might have heard of it. It's about 170 of the biggest emitters in the world that around 700 investors collaborate around to get them to lower their emissions, to improve their reporting, and to improve their governance. That's where we are today.
Yeah.
The next step, if you look at how we work with the coal companies, will be that we increase the contacts with the company with the possibility of excluding them. And this is where I think that the combination of sort of soft dialogue and hard demands can be very effective, which we saw with the coal companies. And this is this is sort of the phase that we're going to enter now. And if it works out, they will improve much more than we expected.
But really, how can a coal company improve if they are still a coal company?
Well, 36 of them are blacklisted.
Yeah, but only 46.
Well, the other ones are improving in some way. If you're a coal mine, it's going to be harder, of course. If you're a coal utility, it's easier, because then you have
but now we're not talking about utility. We're talking about the companies that are extracting the fossil fuel from the ground. You can influence an oil company in many ways, where you are helping them to report better, measure better transparency. That is, of course, a good thing. There is also a possibility to get their scope 1 and 2, lower their emission, so that you install like wind power mill when they extract oil. They use clean energy to extract oil. That is, of course, realistic. But what is you always come back and say that you're able to, you can influence companies. That's good. My question now is, what is your aim? What is your goal with influencing fossil fuel extraction companies? Because do you have a goal to have them to produce less oil, less coal, less gas?
Yes.
Is that a specific goal in your strategy?
The whole strategy is aiming for net zero at 2050. So that's our targets, 2025, 2030, 2050. And the way there, we look a lot at IEA, the International Energy Organization.
Yeah.
They have a pathway to a net zero 2050, which we think was very helpful when it came in 2021. And they have a number of steps there, and they if you take that as a starting point, for example, you can say that coal is something that we have to lose as soon as possible. And there's a number of things around that, which makes it in one way hard, but at the same time maybe easier than oil. When it comes to oil, they have to reduce the production, in particular conventional oil, and all types of unconventional oil, such as oil sands and Arctic drilling.
So you're actively advocating in your ownership that your investment in fossil fuel companies and specific oil extraction companies should reduce their production.
Yes. And in particular, the market as a whole, which means that some of the companies probably should
you need to influence the company, not the market, the company, because otherwise you're not active owner, right?
Yeah, we influence the market through our holdings.
Okay, so I have two follow-up questions about that. One is that it seems to me that it's a very bad idea to invest in a company and vote for them to make less money. Because that's actually what's going to happen if an oil company extracts less oil, don't invest in oil extraction, like most of them are doing today. Wouldn't that mean that you as an investor lose money by influencing them to actually lower their oil production?
Yeah, so if you start with that, since our whole philosophy is to buy the whole market in the interest of our savers, long-term interest, and try to make it more sustainable, this means that we succeed if the total production goes down. And whether individual companies are successful or not is actually not a priority if the whole market is successful. So that means that we're, even from a asset management perspective, trying to avoid try to pick winners and avoid losers. We don't do that type of evaluation at all. So instead, we try to make all our fossil fuel producers, for example, to change and transition. And if we sort of see that they are completely failing or they are not trying to, etc., then they likely end up on our blacklist, like all these coal companies.
But financially, you're willing to invest in a company and lose money on that?
Well, we don't pick individual companies, so we buy the market as it is.
Okay.
And we're not trying to outsmart the market because that's very hard to do. So we think that we don't have a good position to choose which companies are going to be.
But you're choosing when you have 100 companies on the blacklist. So
well, the blacklist, yes, that's an exception from this rule.
Okay, but you can lose money in one company if your portfolio is moving in the right direction.
Our whole portfolio is constantly, there's a lot of companies that are losing money and others are making money.
Can I see, is there like kind of a public log file or where I can read how you vote and where you have actually voted actively to reduce extraction?
Yes.
And where did I find that?
On our website.
Thank you. And for Saudi Aramco specifically, 4 years, that's a long time. We have been in the market for 5-6 years, so it's a very long time in climate. You obviously haven't succeeded to get them to extract less oil in 4 years. Do you see that you can have that influence going forward?
We're going to have to evaluate when we sort of ramp up the pressure, whether there's any response from the company or not. So, as I said, there has been small improvement. It's weak, so in the long run, it will not be enough.
So you're going to sell.
And the question is, if we put more pressure, are they going to respond or not? Maybe they're not, and maybe they're gone.
And you're talking about that you want the market to succeed.
Yes.
And if I interpret that, does that mean that you want oil to fail and clean energy to succeed?
Yes.
interesting because we're totally in line there.
Yeah.
If when I look at the numbers of money that are funded into the fossil fuel industry, oil, coal, and gas, there's a study that last year it was like count up to $3 trillion in just 1 year in investing in those companies, and most of the fossil fuel companies are not moving in the right direction. Most are actually lowering their investment in clean energy and the small they had, and they're leveling up their extraction. Not all, but most. Can we agree on that?
And investors are driving this. I don't know if you saw.
But
I mean
yes, but
in the wrong direction.
Investors are driving it in the wrong direction.
Yes.
Exactly.
I read an article yesterday, maybe you saw it in the Financial Times. There's a hedge fund in London who are attacking BP, which used to be British Petroleum, and want them to give up their targets for lowering production of fossil fuels. And they also want them to give up all investments in renewables. And probably they think that they can squeeze some extra dollars out of the company now. They probably don't have the plan to stay around for a long time. So these investors definitely exist. And that's also one of the things that we think that we can be helpful to be a counterforce within the companies.
So you hope that you can influence other investors by...
Yes.
Have you thought of that you can also influence other investors by leading by example, doing like both the Norwegian state fund and AP7? Because the investments I was talking about, it was not those hedge funds with very, very greedy investors. I'm talking about $3 trillion that was invested last year by companies like yours with ESG strategies and everything, and most of them are saying that they are using their active influence. But what we can see in the rest of this, the extraction and the emission are going up. Have you thought of that if AP7 will blacklist all oil extraction, that you could have a bigger influence on your co-pension funds, and by that lowering this 3 billions and influence climate in that way, and by that creating a market for clean energy? Because if you take the numbers here, this is quite interesting. There's a study that says that what we need in order to get clean energy for the 2030 goal is $4.5 trillion. And pension funds collectively, I'm not talking about the greedy hedge investors, I'm talking about the pension funds, they invested just last year 3 trillion. So have you thought of influencing your co-investors and collectively say, no, let's move this to the clean energy market instead?
Yeah, I interpret what you're saying, that you're thinking of a blanket divestment. So you just take the whole sector out of your investment universe. We're not going to invest in that sector at all.
In companies that are expanding their oil production and not having a plan to phase it down, yes.
Yeah, well, that's something similar to what we're thinking. But we try to, well, we have decided not to do blanket divestments. So saying that we're taking that sector out of our universe. And the simple reason is that it's very hard to see the theory of change. Why is this sector exclusion going to change anything? If you're in the listed equity market, it's a secondary market where investors buy shares from each other. So it's not financing the company in itself. And therefore, the expected results from this is zero.
I will disagree.
Okay.
And I think you can agree on my argument here.
Okay.
Imagine if AP7 and most of your colleagues out there, also other pension fund managers that are investing other people's money, not your own money or your rich friend money, but I mean the people's money. if you stop investing 3 trillion in oil extraction, those money will not cease to exist. Those money can be directed to the clean energy. And we have the numbers. We need $4.5 trillion in new investment in clean energy. Can't we do this switch here?
Well, we're investing in a different type of green investment.
Yeah, I know you do that.
Well,
I know you do that.
Yeah.
But and that is, I mean, I used to work in the finance industry, and this is my frustration. That I mean, most good people in finance are thinking that they can have both the cake and eat it. They are still investing in the fossil, and they're also investing in the clean and the green. But that means that if I have a cup here, we have actually 2 cups here. I will give my money half there and half there. That will help the green transition, but we will not make it, because what we need to do is to scale the green much faster, the $4.5 trillion, and we need to starve that, take the water from there to the cup. Do you see my reasoning?
Yeah, and I think that's where we disagree at the capital starvation theory, that by not buying
someone else will buy
shares,
it. Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
But I totally understand that there will probably be some other investors stepping up and filling that gap. But those $3 trillion that pension funds are funneling into the oil companies can be funneled into the green companies. And $3 trillion will be a game changer for the clean energy transition. Don't you agree?
I agree that we already do it. And if it would be possible to ramp it up massively, we certainly would do it. We have done it within green bonds, which is a different thing. But if you look at listed equity, it's just no point, since it's still the same thing. If we would buy someone else's share on a secondary market, we're not going to improve the company's opportunities to develop. If you want to do that, you have to go straight into the company in a primary financing. And you can do that within private equity much easier. And you can also do it if you're a creditor, because if you give credits, they have to be renewed. So, and then they have to ask for new money, sort of. In the secondary market, we're just sort of switching shares around.
Because not entirely. If you sell a share,
and I'll give you one more example.
It will lose. I mean, the value will go down if you sell a share. If you're a big shareholder.
No, I would say in a liquid market, the general assumption would be that market evaluation is driven by financial performance. So it's a profitable company. Okay. They will have a lot of people.
So what you say here is that it doesn't matter how you invest.
I think in listed equity,
it doesn't
active
matter.
Ownership is the big thing. If you go into, for example, I'll give you a third example. If you go into illiquid assets, like real estate, private equity, or even infrastructure and things, then you can actually finance something that wouldn't be financed otherwise. And then you have some sort of additionality. So I think if you want to do that, if you want to ramp up the clean energy investments, you can do it either within the companies, and that's what we are hoping to be able to do as active owners. So for example, if you look at oil companies, their position is much better than the coal companies because they have strong cash flows. So they could potentially invest much more. This is what I told you the story about BP. They are doing that now. These hedge funds are attacking them for that. So that's sort of one place where the struggle is.
But just to understand, you mean that if collectively pension funds that invest in listed companies, if they sell their oil investments
to
someone else, and they have much more than 3 trillion, because 3 trillion was new investment. But if they take those new investment and make them in clean energy companies instead, you don't say that will have an effect on the market, making oil company less valuable and clean energy public traded companies more valuable if you get a capital flow where you sell 3 trillion and buy 3 trillion. Are you really saying that?
In the listed equity market?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also, I mean, it's a very hypothetical example for the simple reason that everybody has a asset management assignment. So I would say that it's very improbable that all these pension funds around the world would give up their own
I'm not talking about giving up.
beliefs.
I'm just talking, yeah, of course, but I mean, companies influence companies, and now we actually have this in the COP28 agreement that we are supposed to transition away,
Yes.
and more investors, even if AP7 are not doing it yet, are actually doing that. So my belief it's just a matter of time until a majority is going to do this, but that's just my belief. But
I don't think we disagree a lot here. I mean, some details are obviously different, but
so maybe you're changing your strategy.
no, but as long as we talk about a combination of, that's how we use it. We use blacklisting in combination with investment, and these are two sides of the transition, sort of.
Yeah, I see. It's just that.
But if you take all of this whole sector away, it's.
I give you credit for that. The blacklist and the active ownership can work. There's a lot of scientific evidence that active ownership can work. Doesn't mean that everyone that are doing it are doing it in a way it works.
Absolutely true.
But what
and
we
it
also,
doesn't always work either.
It doesn't always work, and what is becoming more and more clear is for the big oil, it hasn't worked in the past.
If you look at historical, it was actually looking pretty good until the Ukraine war.
Yeah, I know.
And then it was like a major backlash.
It looked good.
Yeah, and you can never know. I know.
It looked good. I agree on the looks, but the way we see the emission going up and the oil extraction going up, it probably looked better than it was actually where it was. But now it's terrible in many.
And the big problem is the coal. And you know, I thought about that when I read your comments there. That you know, I don't know if you work with big company like China, Shenhua Energy, the biggest coal producer in the world.
Yeah.
And a number of those, there's a lot in China, of course. They are really, I would say, a more acute problem to deal with.
I think we don't have the time to choose. We need to get off both oil, coal, and gas.
Yeah, well, that's true.
And there is some fossil fuel companies that have made that transition, like Ørsted. It's a Danish company that have made it from being a very oily company to a green company. But they are the exception. I believe that giving them more money, investing in those companies, make a difference. We have a different view, but I have some final questions to you.
Sure.
First of all, I think this has been a very good discussion, so thank you a lot for that. But now I'm going to ask you quite difficult question.
Okay.
I hope you don't mind, and that is, you have 5 million pension savers. So in your case, you don't have 98% that controls everything. You have 5 million that controls everything. How fast do you think AP7 will change? How many savers will it take to divest from you?
Yeah. Well, you have to understand that we are very much in direct contact with them through the system we're in. And since the whole Swedish population choose their representatives, the parliament, and the parliaments are the one who giving us instructions. They are writing out exactly.
But they say the same instruction to AP1 that have had a total other interpretation of that and don't invest in fossil fuel. And all the citizens in Sweden that are making a choice, they can actually withdraw their money from AP7.
But not from the buffer funds.
But they can from the premium system, so it could be a heavily outflow from your fund. So my question is that, have you asked your 5 million clients that you're actually doing the work for, if they agree on you on those issues, if they want you to invest in oil companies such as Saudi Aramco and this market, have you asked them?
We have done a couple of surveys over the years. Now, it's very important that we have a very clear instruction what we should do, and that's where we are evaluated and hold accountable. So that's something that is, and we have a lot of different types of auditing, etc. In those surveys that we have done over the years, the general conclusion is that the majority of the Swedish population think we should take sustainability into consideration. There's a minority, a small group that think we shouldn't. They think.
But have you asked them about investing in fossil fuel extraction?
Well, we haven't, sort of done a lot of detailed.
Do you have any plans to do that?
No, yeah, we might do it. It's not like we decided not to, but the important thing we think is to try to interpret the instructions we have and explain what we try to do and why we think this is in the best interest of our savers. We think that we would not take our responsibility if we didn't try to contribute to the transition that the companies and the society has to go through. And if we leave the problems for someone else to solve, that would, for us, be worse.
So you don't think that the money you have invested in Saudi Aramco Oil could have been in better use somewhere else?
Well, I think that we can do some good as active owners. And if we come to the conclusion that we can't do anything, we might leave. But I don't think that if we would have left all the oil companies and all the other problems in the world, that would have improved anything.
So you don't agree with the Norwegian fund?
Well, they are actually, they are political, their decisions around this are political. And if we would have that in Sweden, of course, if the politicians decided how her investment should be done, we would follow.
What is your view? Do you think they should do that, political system?
I think we have a good system in the way that we have arm's length distance between politicians and pension money. There's a big risk if that distance doesn't exist, and we can see it in a lot of other countries, because of course it's tempting to start to do politics, and if depending what party is in control, they're going to do different things, and the risk is that pensions are hurt by this.
Yes, but it could also be a way to solve the climate crisis, because...
But there's a lot of different opinions in the parliament, as you probably know.
Yeah.
And some of them would probably do something completely different.
It's very true. But the question here, how is your 5 million pension savers thinking? That we will need to find out. And if you're not going to do the survey, I'm gonna promise you, we don't have time, we'll do that survey. Will you be interested to see the results?
Sure.
And if I could show you a result, that is many that don't like your strategy or good enough, will you consider to change it?
Well, we're still going to do what we think is in the best of our interest of our savers. So, if this would be a debate, of course, that would be with the people who write our instructions. And
so you will not listen to your pension savers if they have a strong opinion?
Of course I will. But it doesn't mean that we will do something that we think is bad for them.
So you think it's bad to divest from oil?
Well, giving up active ownership as an idea, I think that would be bad.
I think it will be bad not to give up the idea, but to give up if that's really happening. And I'm not seeing that in the oil sector. I hope I'm wrong, but I have not seen it yet. And you also, I noticed that since the Ukraine war, etc. But I think this is...
But let me just ask.
Yes.
All the companies that we don't, there are many thousands of companies that we don't own in the world.
Yeah.
What is our impact on them?
I think that your impact on them is that they will be much more valuable if you start investing in them. I'm a startup myself, and I listen a lot to investors. They have a lot of opinions, trust me. But once they have invested, I don't listen to them as much. I listen to them as much more before they are investing. And it's not true that you only invest in secondary shares, because the better liquidity, the better trading you have in a stock, the easier it is to finance by doing by printing new shares, etc. So if I totally convinced is that if the pension money start to move away from the fossil fuel industry, it will be more expensive to get funded, and that will make the fossil fuel industry to look at other investments instead of just digging more and more and more oil. That is what I'm convinced of. And I'm also convinced that when we do the survey among Swedish citizens, I don't think it's a question if you vote right or left. I think most people want to have a future and want Sweden and the world to actually stay below the limits we have until we have
That's exactly what we
escalating climate crisis. And I don't think, I think we need to reevaluate the oil industry, because it's one thing to, I mean, it's not that they are not listening to us. They're actively working against us and the whole sustainability. And I mean, in Saudi Arabia, it's very clear that that is happening. So I hope you will see what we do in this survey. I'm also looking forward to see how you maybe are updating your rules a little bit. And as long as you do active ownership, I'm looking forward to see more tangible. I don't see the tangible results of it. You can communicate that a little bit better, I think.
We communicate a lot, and of course we can communicate even more. I mean,
but in 4 years, sorry, I don't want to be rude here, but you have owned Saudi Aramco Oil in 4 years. Tell me what you have done.
Well, as I told you, we launched this program in 2022, so that's 2 years ago. It was not related to any particular company. It was an ambition to increase our efforts to contribute to the transition. So we started in 2022. We have engaged in that time with more than 70 coal companies.
Yes, but what have you done in Saudi Aramco?
Well, the thing is that prioritizing is a way to focus your energy on certain things with limited resources. Resources are always scarce, so you have to prioritize something and not try to do everything.
I think if...
And just to say this,
yes.
We prioritize the coal companies because they are the most damaging. We will get into oil companies too, and we have done collaborative work on them within the Climate Action 100s. We will increase in the coming years.
What you're really saying here is that you have owned both coal companies and oil companies.
Yes.
But you have limited resources, so you have prioritized the active ownership for the coal companies.
Yes.
So that you haven't done as much active ownership on the oil companies.
We have, but there's an escalation ladder, which the last steps are very labor intensive. So it's going to take a lot of time from our side. So we did this with the 70 coal companies, and that was maximum what we can handle because there's so much interaction going on. And then we have...
Don't you think it's better to...
decision process.
To make the investment when you have the resources to do the active ownership?
Well, I mean, of course, you can be like there are a lot of funds around the world. There are 1,000 people or 1,500 people, etc. But in the oil fund, I think there are like 1,500 something. So, and they own 9,000 companies. So we all have different conditions that we work from.
I hope you funnel your resources into be very, very active as long as you're an investor. And
We will.
the time comes when you're not an investor in oil, expanding oil, etc. I hope you use that active ownership to influence your co-colleagues in the pension industry, because we really need to move the money.
Exactly what we're doing. And that's one of the important parts, also being an owner, because then you can have collaborative efforts and agree around sustainable
I will say that
principles.
it's exactly what you want to do.
Well, we're doing it as much as possible.
Have you done as much as possible as an owner in Saudi Aramco Oil in the 4 years since you first invested in them?
Well, as I told you, we're prioritizing our efforts, and it has not been on that type of conventional oil.
Okay, so you have been a passive owner more than an active.
No, it has been. We're part of a collaborative initiative, which is one of the steps, and the final step is blacklisting. Well, you know, you clearly think that we should leave all oil companies, and in that point we disagree. But we will increase, and some of them will be blacklisted, but probably not the whole sector.
I believe personally that my pension money, I don't want to invest in what's causing the problem, because that's my strategy. I believe that active ownership can work in some cases, but I also been working in finance industries. I know it takes a lot of work to do that, and I don't see if you have this active ownership strategy in the fossil fuel industry, my view is that you can improve that active ownership. And I hope you do that. Or
I agree on that too. We have been improving as long as I'm here, and we will continue. So it's not like we have reached the final stage or anything. On the other hand, there's a lot of sustainability challenges in the world to deal with. So you're focusing on one of them, and it's an important one, but there are others too that are at least as important. If you look at the biodiversity challenge that we're facing, this might easily be a bigger problem. Even climate change is sort of part of it.
It's very connected.
Yeah.
But it's glad that you are working with many things in this area. Last question.
Yes.
On a personal note, are you optimistic about that we're going to solve the climate crisis, or what is your feeling about the whole situation? Or the planetary crisis? Biodiversity.
I would say I'm not an optimist, and I wouldn't say I'm a pessimist either. I think that if we would just remain doing what we're doing today, it looks very bad. But there's no reason to assume that we will not adapt and do better things and more things than we're doing today. And if I look at the most recent forecast I saw was 2.7 degrees. That will mean that a lot of people will suffer, but we will survive. And we're gonna still have to work with mitigation, but we have to put a lot more resources into adaptation and try to prepare for something which is not Armageddon, but unfortunately not as good as today.
So you're optimistic that we will make it, but it will be a rough ride, and that we can agree on is that we all need to do more and also change a little bit.
Yeah, and we need to collaborate. And I think the good thing about this is that we're having a dialogue. We have different opinions on some things and maybe similar on others. And through this dialogue, we're gonna get engaged. You're gonna do things you don't do today. I hope you ramp up your efforts.
Absolutely.
And I'm gonna do that. And when we do this on a society basis, so it's politicians, it's companies, investors, organizations, this is what it takes.
Johan, I want to thank you for an honest discussion, and I'm looking forward to come here next time, maybe have a dialogue about something good you have done in our community.
I think we're doing a lot of good things.
I think you have a lot of potential, and I'm also looking forward to see how you're going to be more active and maybe also change your strategy. So thank you so much.
And we're going to be happy to report as long as this journey goes along. Because we don't have another interest in it than you. You think that something else would be more effective, but we're going to try to show the results.
So that was quite interesting dialogue with Johan Florén at AP7. Some conclusions that I think was quite interesting is that, according to Johan, he doesn't see that how they are investing their money are making any difference at all. So the only way he thinks that he can actually influence companies is become their owners and be very active. I understand that it's a lot of examples where you can be active as an investor, but in 4 years I didn't really hear any argument what AP7 actually had done in influencing Saudi Aramco Oil. They were talking about that they can do it and they will do it, but it was not so much example on how they do it. So that's why I think that it still deserves a climate warning. But I'm very glad that they took this dialogue with us, and I hope to come back here in 1 year to see how they have updated their strategies, because in between the lines I heard a lot about that they were probably going to look into how they are thinking and their strategy into fossil fuel investment. They have done a lot of de-investment in coal, and I don't really understand that. If they say that it doesn't matter how they invest for the share price, why is it important to de-invest from coal in that case? Regarding Saudi Aramco Oil, quite interesting. They came with a new announcement today, the Saudi state, that they were actually not going to increase their production as much as previously communicated. They are still going to have a max output of 12 millions of barrels per day. That is heavily, but they are affecting of the markets. We will see how that is actually going. Now I'm talking about the oil market. So thanks for following us. If you want to see more of those interviews where we ask questions to leaders and companies, create Climate Love and Climate Warning on We Don't Have Time. And if enough people agree on you, we will invite the leaders to have those dialogues for our future. Thanks for following.